Sorry for making you guys wait. Let's get into the actual rating right away. So this is the first team that I'm going to be rating today by Mocrispy. He has Setup Slowbro with Nasty Plot, Quick Claw with Quick Draw. It is a bit inconsistent, but I'm not gonna get rid of it or anything. It is a very cool set, and I want to see what they can do with it. So first off, I do see that the 4 speed EVs are being wasted here. I'm just gonna take out that 4 EVs and put it into special defense. And that is usually not gonna matter too much, but it's better than wasting those 4 EVs for nothing. Scarf Zapdos, we can keep the Zapdos, but let's see if it needs a different set. We'll come back to that Zapdos later. And Alola Ninetales has a good defensive spread. With the 44 defense, it always lives Adamant Urshifu's Surging Strikes, which is very important. So if you aren't doing this with your Ninetales, you should always be doing this. The thing with Veil or some kind of light screen reflect setup is that they are always going to be a bit weak to Urshifu. So you really want to make sure you get that matchup down pat. So it's not only going to one-hit KO the Water Urshifu, it's also going to one-hit KO the Dark Urshifu. So those two are very important to this team, and that's why I would not skip out on Moonblast. And Sheer Cold is a fine move as the last one. And let's go to the other 3 Pokemon here. The problem I have with this Gastrodon is that it bleeds a lot of momentum. It doesn't even have Yawn, so it can't really force out general switch-ins. Like, for example, Rillaboom is gonna come into Gastrodon pretty safely, and unless it gets burned, even basically everything is taking a lot of damage from Woodhammer. Slowbro on this team is offensively invested, not the best switch-in. Also, Scarf Zapdos, not the best switch-in either. So you do have the resists, but it's not something that you want to do more than a couple of times, while Gastrodon will let them do it more than a couple of times every game because it's not very active Pokemon. So what you want to do with a defensive Pokemon like Gastrodon is you also want to pair it with another secondary defensive Pokemon that will complement its weaker matchups. So here what I suggest you do is there's few ways to go around using Gastrodon. First would be to set up Stealth Rocks first and kind of use Gastrodon as a Yawn bot. Arguably that kind of setup might be outclassed by Swampert, which can set up Rocks and Yawn at the same time. So the other option is to use a defensive Zapdos with Roost and Eerie Impulse. Gastrodon can let Calm Mind Finny set up, which is not very good unless you change out Ice Beam to clear Smog. That is a really good option as well. But you could also switch to Eerie Impulse defensive Zapdos, which will actually let you switch into multiple Woodhammers. You can roost off the damage, which is pretty good. And that's also going to help you a lot against the Tapu Fini. With the Eerie Impulse, they can't really Calm Mind and pose too much of a threat. And finally, the thing that I like the most is that it gives you another way to set up Slowbro Galar. Slowbro has a pretty good physical defense, but its special defense is a bit more lacking. It really likes the support from Ninetales, but you can't bring Ninetales every game, so the Eerie Impulse Zapdos kind of lets you spam Eerie Impulse, Roost, and all that, and Volt Switch out, and now your Slowbro might have a really good setup opportunity against a special attacker. So that's gonna give you an extra dimension of play. And finally, I think that makes the team pretty solid overall. But Entei, you could use Entei. You could also just swap the AV Entei out for AV Cinderace. That'd be also be a fine pick. But I think I'm a bit scared of the Landorus T with this team. Yeah, you have the Ninetales, but that is only one Pokemon. So an option that you could do is swap that out for an offensive Celesteela, so that's also going to give you the fire coverage. But unlike Entei, or even other more meta fire types such as Heatran or Cinderace, they will all lose to Landorus T and Garchomp pretty handily, so Celesteela is gonna cover that matchup defensively, which I think is pretty important to this team. You can't just rely on Ninetales to handle everything there. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good overall. And let's look at the next team. This is team by Jashon, and when I saw the Pokemon in there, I was a bit concerned with how I should go about rating this because they have one of the 6 best Pokemon in the metagame right now, but the sets, the items, and the moves and EVs they're using on these are not the most optimal, so let's walk through them one by one. Garchomp, the Assault Vest set is perfectly fine, so let's leave that there. Though, no, wait a second, it doesn't have Earthquake, so you want to use Earthquake, which is Garchomp's most reliable stab move. So you want Earthquake, Scale Shot, and you want to only pick 2 of Iron Head, Brick Break, and Rock Slide. And I will say you want to pick Rock Slide and Brick Break because Iron Head, even though yeah you hit fairies super effective, Garchomp is supposed to be weak against fairies. The most common fairy type, which is Tapu Fini, isn't actually hit super effectively by Iron Head. And don't even think about picking Poison Jab for the super effective damage because Poison Jab has 80 base power. After super effective, that is 160. It is barely any stronger than Earthquake, which has 100 base power and gets boosted to 150 base power after stab. So you are basically wasting that slot for basically minimal damage and increase against one Pokemon in the metagame. So you want to use Rock Slide for the Zapdos, you want to use Brick Break or Fire Fang. So those are your main move options on AV Garchomp. For the Urshifu, that looks fine. Just making sure, double checking, making sure it doesn't have a missing stab move. Mimikyu, the moves are fine. The EVs are a bit weird. I don't really want to get too much into EVs, but it really looks like you just randomly scroll them without really knowing what you're doing. Honestly, if you think that's like if you're offended by that, don't be. I'm just saying what it looks like. So, and there's nothing wrong with not knowing how to EV stuff, especially for something that you're trying to EV defensively for both Porygon 2 and Mimikyu. So these are very notoriously hard Pokemon to EV, so I get that completely if you feel lost. You're not alone, but just use these spreads that I give you first, and I think they should serve you pretty well. And for the Cinderace, the moves are fine except for acrobatics. So bounce is going to be a better move most of the time. And yeah, bounce is a 2-turn move that can kind of work against you at times. But acrobatics is, first of all, it's a lot weaker. It is only going to be 55 base power, and you're always going to be holding your life orb unless you get knocked off. And knockoff is not a very common move. And on top of acrobatics, the base move having low base power, the max airstream, what makes Cinderace really good is its ability to go for stab max airstreams. And acrobatics based airstreams are really much weaker than bounce based max airstreams. So you want to use bounce for that at the very least. And bounce can have actually pretty interesting ways to take advantage of its 2-turn effect by bouncing on a Pokemon that is Dynamaxing, and that gets you 2 turns of Dynamax out of the way. And that is pretty useful because Cinderace is really fast, and after Max Airstream, it gets even faster. It's probably the fastest thing in the game. So, yeah, you want to take advantage of that with the bounce. Porygon 2, the moves look fine. Recover, Thunderbolt, Try Attack, Eerie Impulse. Actually, on this team, I would suggest Ice Beam over Thunderbolt because your team is pretty weak to Landorus T as is, so you want to not do that. And Eerie Impulse is fine. I would suggest Iron Tail, and yeah, you should be good to go. Hippowdon with Moringa Berry, that is an interesting set, and I will leave that set. No, I won't leave that set be because that is a pretty cool tech to switch into Zapdos, for sure. But the thing is, you're gonna also have Porygon 2, you're gonna have a Sulfast Garchomp, so I don't really see the point in having a Hippowdon that is teched out to beat Zapdos like this. And finally, Weather Ball is really weak on Hippowdon. You want to... Hippowdon, the thing with Hippowdon is it actually has a really meaty attack stat for a defensive Pokemon, so you want to be using Earthquake to take advantage of that. The moves are fine. Let's use Citrus instead of Moringa, and you should be good to go. And I think that still leaves you a bit weak to things like Swords Dance, Landorus T, but I'm just gonna leave this team as is, and you should play games out for yourself and kind of take a feel for the game in general yourself. I think that's pretty important. Third team is by fRaestyle, pretty cool nickname, and the PokePaste does say they are for fair and square, so I missed the deadline for that, I guess, but sorry. But let's still get into the rating. Grassy Surge, Rillaboom Swords Dance, that is a perfectly fine set, but if you want to do one thing that is kind of cool, is you can just use offensive spread, max 8 attack, max speed on Adamant Rillaboom. And what that allows you to do actually is once you get the Dynamax traded for both ways, defensive Zapdos will actually be slower than Adamant Max Speed Rillaboom, and you can just one-shot that after Swords Dance with Life Orb, all that boosts on top of it, which is actually really cool. So you want to take advantage of that, I think, especially because you are indeed pairing it up with the Stealth Rock Hippowdon, and I think that's a really good synergy there. You could use Swampert over it though, but Hippowdon does have its advantages, so I'm just gonna leave it as Hippowdon. But I'm just gonna say and include the option of Swampert here. Just kind of letting you know that Swampert plus SD Rillaboom is pretty popular, so if you want to experiment with that, you should try that out definitely. Lumberry Garchomp is a good set, but Lumberry 4 attacks Garchomp is really not. So what you want to do with Lumberry is you want to take advantage of moves like Yawn or Will-O-Wisp and other status moves, especially Yawn, because Yawn takes 2 turns to activate, and they might not necessarily know that Garchomp is holding it until it's too late. But so you really want to take advantage of those free turns with a move like Swords Dance. So you would use Scale Shot, Earthquake, Stone Edge, or Fire Fang, and Swords Dance. I would actually suggest Fire Fang on this because if they see Rillaboom and Garchomp, they're probably gonna pick Celesteela if they have it, and Stealth Rock plus Celesteela could kind of get out of hand for just Rotom Heat to kind of deal with. So let's put Fire Fang. You want an extra way to deal with Celesteela. Won't hurt at all for this team. Aviazu set is fine. It says Steel Roller. Steel Roller is not a good move. You want to use either because we got rid of Brick Break here, and you want to use Brick Break here. If you want to use something to get rid of screens, Azu is definitely the better user of Brick Break because you actually have a pretty good type advantage, matchup advantage against common screen setters, so you have a positive matchup against Grimmsnarl. You also are hit super effectively by Freeze Dry, but it still ends up doing no damage anyways because of your Assault Vest. So they will stay in a lot of times and go for Veil as you go for Liquidation, and Freeze Dry for like no damage as you Break, and they'll be in Aqua Jet KO range. So that is a much better Break user than Garchomp. And Plasma Fist, I assume that's just a typo. You want Play Rough. And yeah, other than that, it looks good. Rotom Heat, I am actually just gonna adjust the EV spreads on this. This spread, what this allows you to do is always survive. Have a really good chance, not always, but have a really good chance of surviving Surging Strikes, 3 hits from Urshifu. And that is kind of I think that's really cool. Magnezone looks good. I think this team's pretty good. And the next team is by guccimane. And here is the team. It's got Nihilego, Bandit Urshifu, Glastrier, Mimikyu with the Trick Room combo. That is pretty nice. Cinderace, Special Cinderace, and Landorus T. So the obvious thing I see here is I don't really like Body Press on Glastrier, yet has a pretty high defense stat, but you also have a really high attack stat, and you are just going to be naturally boosting that with Chang. So you want to take advantage of that with close combat. You usually just want to use Max Knuckle, and that is going to be usually a better option here. And if not, you actually, if you don't want to use close combat because you lower your defenses, I think it is better to use Sword Stance on this slot instead. And instead on the Landorus T, Assault Vest doesn't let you use Sword Stance, so you should get rid of that. And in fact, AV denies Landorus from using Max Guard, so you can't take advantage of Sword Stance like that either. Lando isn't really switching into there's just not many knockoff users in the meta. And so what I suggest you do with the Landorus T is actually use this defensive Lando T with Sword Dance and Citrus Berry. And the reason for that is you are actually kind of weak to Cinderace, because as long as you don't beat their Cinderace with yours, which isn't the most reliable thing, you kind of lose with basically everything else on your team. So you don't want that to happen. So Citrus defensive Lando T can still use Sword Stance, still be threatening offensively, but also has the added bonus of acting as a defensive check to one of the most popular things in the game. And the other times you want to use a defensive spread on Lando is if you want to use a specially defensive spread for Zapdos. But you also already have a Nihilego, you have a Glastrier, so I don't think that is really the most pressing concern here. But I will play with this, because I think overall the team looks good. And next team is from Alexis. They have a really interesting team with Orbeetle, Scyther, Corviknight, Cinderace, Abomasnow, and Diggersby. So it does look like this is mostly more of a favorites team. So instead of trying to change out so many of the members, I will try to just work with what we got here. So Frisk, lead, Light Clay, or Beetle. So let's keep that as your main lead. And you want ways to set up with your Pokemon in the back. So Scyther has Sword Stance, X-Scissor, Dual Wing Beat, Brick Break. The moves look fine. Corviknight, Body Press, Iron Head, Roost, Brightbird. So you want to use Iron Defense on Corviknight, and that's gonna be a lot better at actually setting up. It actually takes advantage of the screens, and it's a defensive pivot. It's much better at being a defensive pivot with Iron Defense. And Cinderace has bounce, high jump kicks, sucker punch, and cinderace, powerball. So that is good, but one thing I would suggest that you do is actually use bulk up on the cinderace instead. And what you can do is use bulk up, high jump kick, giga impact, and pyro ball, and with Lumberry. The reason why I suggest this is there's a lot of things in the meta that are actually immune to sticky webs. Zapdos is one of them, and you want to hit Zapdos hard and deny it from getting Airstream boosts. So that's why I suggest Giga Impact over Bounce on this team. And as you can see, Scyther, Corviknight, a lot of them are actually weak to Zapdos as well. So I think you want to be able to pressure it offensively from the get-go. And Giga Impact helps with that. And if you can set up screens first, that's really nice. That means that you can take advantage of bulk up and sweep like that as well. Abomasnow has okay moves. For Focus Sash, you could, if you really want to like make this team a lot better, you could honestly combine Abomasnow and Orbeetle and put Alola Ninetales there. But if you don't like Alola Ninetales, that is up to you. But that is probably what I would suggest. And as for the Diggersby, instead of Iron Head, Bounce is gonna let you get speed boosts. And instead of Quick Attack is fine as well. You could use Giga Impact on it as well, but because you also have Giga Impact on Cinderace. Quick Attack, because we already took out that Sucker Punch for priority, right? So I think Quick Attack here isn't the end of the world here. So that let's use Earthquake, Bounce, Ice Punch, and Quick Attack. And I think that is a good set. So yeah. And Jashon also left me a second team, but I looked at it and it has kind of the same mistakes that the first one did. The acrobatic Cinderace, the weird spreads on the defensive Pokemon. So I felt like that was gonna be a pretty redundant review. So let's go with the other teams first. And if we have time, I will get back to this one as well. I also have to get back to another team. Tirade you posted 2 teams, so I'm gonna do that if I have time. And let's get to the next one. And this is team from Raizen, the Lightning, and I really like this team actually. Raikou is a pretty cool Pokemon, and it's able to actually set up Sub Calm Mind up on Zapdos, which is pretty important for the team here. And the team has 2 really cool sets, the Life Orb Garchomp with Stealth Rock, and the Endeavor Focus Sash Rillaboom. Both are really important to this team. It can set up for whatever they got in the back. So one thing that strikes out to me is if they can kind of get Stealth Rocks up and whittle something with Garchomp, they can just bring in the Celesteela, which also has a really good type synergy with Garchomp, and just go for the Airstream, or Meteor Beam, and get a bunch of boosts and start snowballing from there. And I guess the one concern I have with this team is that it's pretty shoehorned in its matchup against Zapdos. There's you either set up with Raikou or you airstream past it with Beast Boost Celesteela. There's very no other way about it type of teams, which is fine, but you're gonna have to keep that in mind in team preview and everything. And that's gonna come up basically every other game because that's how common Zapdos is. But I think if you this is your team, and if you have a lot of experience picking around Zapdos, that is gonna actually serve you really well in basically in the next few seasons, as long as Zapdos is allowed. Because if you have more experience with your team, your opponent's not going to have as many insight to how you pick your team. It is always going to be a guess at best for your opponent, while you have a lot of good ideas on exactly how you should navigate around the team preview. So having a weak matchup like this isn't really the end of the world. But if you are aware, cognizant of that, then that is fine. I guess the one other thing is with the Cinderace, you have U-turn on Scarf Cinderace, but you actually don't have many things to pivot into. So Raikou and Celesteela basically give you the minimum bulk needed in order to actually switch into things like Zapdos or Landorus T that might Dynamax in front of Cinderace. And that is fine, but that again limits your options. So I really want to kind of play with this team firsthand before giving too much feedback. And what I saw was that actually this team was uncomfortably weak to Cinderace. That was a big problem as well. Bounce Airstream. Cinderace just kind of goes through this team pretty handily, and you really don't have much to check it, other because you are usually leading a Garchomp. You're not saving that for the back, and that is not good. And other than that, though, I think so. In order to check the Cinderace matchup, you are gonna have to switch out something. So there's a few options you could do. You could swap out some of the movesets, so you could use Focus Sash counter on either the Urshifu or the Cinderace, and that would be a way to kind of at least have one way to go around that without being too changing the team too much. But they will still kind of affect how the team plays out. So other than that, though, let's look at another way to check that. So if you want to check it, I think you will have to swap out a member here. And here, you on a team like this, you don't really need to make sure that you get a clean switch into Cinderace. You just need a couple of things that can actually threaten it 1v1. And an example of that would probably be something like Dragonite or Dragapult or even Scarf Dracovish, things like that can chuck Cinderace 1v1 and make it a lot easier for your team to deal with. Because right now, Garchomp is the only thing that actually beats Cinderace 1v1, and that is no good. That is just not good enough. And here I just gave you a Dragapult set that is pretty good in the meta right now. And I think that could go over Cinderace as your pivot user as well. And it actually has pretty good type synergy with Celesteela as well in the back. So I think that's a good call. And finally, this last team is going to be from Daniel. And we got Thunderous Therian with Nasty Plot, Togekiss with Nasty Plot, Magnezone with Body Press, Sash Urshifu that looks good, SD Landorus that was max attack, max speed with Citrus Berry, and Calm Mind, Reflect, Taunt, Draining Kiss, Calm Mind, Tapu Fini. So, let's start with what I like about the team. The Urshifu, Landorus T, the Tapu Fini set is a bit unconventional, but I think that works pretty well. Magnezone, also a pretty good pick. I like the set. I think I've showcased that set in a video before, and I think that works really well with the team. Urshifu, you have that Urshifu in order to kind of put extra pressure on the Porygon too with the Magnezone, so I think that's a good core. But Thunderous, Therian, and Togekiss, I think we can work a little bit more with that, what we got there. So I would say I would probably try to build around either the Thunderous Therian or the Togekiss. Let's build with the Therian here, because I think Thunderous Therian is pretty good Pokemon. While Togekiss has a lot more trouble in the meta right now. But if you wanted to build starting with Togekiss, that is fine as well. So for the Thunder Therian set, I think what makes a lot more sense is Nasty Plot is good. I would either pick one or the other from Thunderbolt and Volt Switch. And I know that they do serve two different functions. Volt Switch lets it kind of be a pivot, and Thunderbolt is the good damage option. But the thing is, you really want the coverage from Focus Blast, and arguably also you want Max Strike as well in order to kind of get the speed control on the opponent. And this is a bulky Citrus or Aqua or Wikiberry Landorus Thunderous T set that I really like, and I think that will work well here. I definitely see the reason why you have Grass Knot though is because you don't really do well against a lot of the Yawn users like Swampert and Hippowdon. You want to get rid of that as soon as possible. So that is very understandable. So alternative option here is actually Lumberry Swords Dance on the Landorus T. As I said, like it's kind of similar to Lum SD Garchomp. If they are trying to yawn you, that you can just Swords Dance twice as they like yawn into Stealth Rock or Stealth Rock into yawn, or better yet, yawn into Protect, and you can get two SDs up, and that can basically take over the game really quickly. I do think for the Togekiss, having that fire coverage from Togekiss is actually a very nice call. So let's try to pick something that has the fire coverage, can be another cleaner, and let's see. I think Dragonite has pretty good synergy here. And it's also an Airstream sweeper that you are looking for, also has the fire type coverage. So I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you kind of want that instant Dynamax Airstream power the Scope Lens Super Luck Togekiss gives you, you could honestly just use the Life Orb from the Thunders that we took out and put it on a special Dragonite set and use 4 attacks special Dragonite that can really catch some players off guard. And I think that could be a good set. Or alternatively, if you're more a fan of more setup, piling on setup after setup, we could use Dragon Dance, Weakness Policy, Roost with Stab Airstream option, and Fire Punch. I think that is gonna be a pretty good set as well. So yeah, that is gonna be it. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry it's kind of took a lot longer than I thought it would be, but hope this is helpful. Bye.